Hello and welcome to our podcast named Detours. This podcast embraces the unexpected twists and turns that shapes the journeys of our lives that God sends us down. I'm your host and fellow traveler, Mike. I'm here with my beautiful wife, Deb, and we invite you to join us on this exploration of uncharted territories we encounter along the way. So without further ado, let's dive into this episode. Detours family, hello and welcome to episode number 3, I believe we are on for season 4.
Hi guys.
What is going on, Deb?
Gosh, episode just keep coming back around. Like we're still doing this wonderful thing.
Yeah, it's getting easier.
I think so.
The just the joy that comes out of doing this. It's nice to have this that we get to look forward to every couple of weeks.
I know. We get to talk through some pretty deep things, so.
At least we think it's deep.
That's true.
People may be laughing at us as we say that.
Well, fair enough.
Yeah, so I think we were talking, obviously getting ready for this episode, and we kind of agreed that in the last episode, we talked about what you called the anger management toolbox, correct?
That's correct, yeah.
And I think we briefly touched on one or two of those items, but you said there's a lot more to this toolbox, right?
I think we can unpack a lot of the different tools. And I think that anyone wanting to build a toolbox to help them manage their stress and their anger can really have as many tools as they want. I think these are just things that have worked for me, and I'm sure you're going to mention some things that work for you. But yeah.
So what were items number 1 and 2 that we've already at least briefly touched on?
We briefly touched on your body speaks. So knowing your physiological responses to anger and kind of getting those warning signs and going, okay, here they come. What do I do now? So you're not so caught off guard. And then also we talked briefly about knowing your triggers. What are the things that are really pushing your buttons? And a lot of times it's not what you're actually dealing with. A lot of times it's something deeper, a hurt or something that's touched you maybe in childhood or previously, and it's now starting to resurface.
And so let's give some context to where we're pulling from. This toolbox, this is a toolbox that you have assembled
Yes.
in conjunction with Trees of Hope, an organization that you serve with around sexual abuse. I'm sure we're not the first podcast out there to say anger is a secondary emotion, right?
No.
That's very common knowledge. But the context for this was, Trees of Hope kind of approached you and asked you to assist with a certain area of their curriculum. And you've kind of assembled this toolbox over the course of however many months of writing and working with them, right?
Right. I mean, this comes from lots of different healing groups. There's not one in particular, but I did write a 40-day devotional for them. And part of the devotional is managing anger from sexual abuse. And so this was part of the curriculum, but I think this is appropriate for all kinds of anger. Because not every listener that's going to listen to us has had that struggle, but anger comes up for all of us. It's a human emotion that we can't escape.
Yeah, I have no experience with sexual abuse, and yet I struggle with anger. So yeah, there's going to be things that you'll kind of unpack today that I'll relate differently to. But so what is? Let's kind of start diving in. What was Anger Toolbox tool number 1?
Oh, like I said, we're going to talk about how the body responds during the anger process. Because there's a lot of times where people get to the point of exploding, like right away, and they're like, how did I get here?
That's me. I'm a spewer.
You will?
I'll bottle it up, and then something will happen that is the straw that breaks the camel's back. Yes. And then I say something that I regret. That's me.
And interesting that you say that, because sometimes we're talking and it looks like we're doing the fun banter, and all of a sudden it's not fun anymore. And I'm like, that was quick. Am I missing some signals here? Like, that was quick.
No, it was probably something building up inside of me, and I'm definitely that, where other people will bottle it up, and that's no good.
Right.
There's spewers, there's bottling up, there's all sorts of reactions to that anger, and almost none of it is good, right? The Bible does talk about Jesus having righteous anger.
Correct.
So we will also talk about at some point, either today or in a future episode, something about the right kind of anger, and how to handle that. But let's dive into the toolbox for now, and if we cross that bridge, we cross it.
Fair enough.
But so talk to me. When did you start getting angry growing up?
Oh gosh, that's
Do you
embarrassing.
remember what?
I think I was angry very young.
Yeah.
And I think I talked about in the previous episode, anger was a very common emotion, often displayed in my home, and really the only really acceptable form of emotion that could be had. So I was angry young.
And do you remember the emotions around that? Have they always been the same, at least pattern wise? Has it evolved?
Well, yeah, I think it evolves. I think when you're little, you don't know how to articulate your anger. You don't understand where it's coming from. Looking back as an adult woman to my younger self, I know exactly where the anger came from. Most of it was around injustice or being not validated, not being allowed to just have emotions. And so that would tick you off too. But as you get older, there typically is different responses your body has that you can articulate as an adult that you couldn't articulate as a kid. And so a lot of times, like you're saying, you bottle up. There has to be something that your body warns you about. Maybe it's a heaviness in your chest. Maybe your breathing pattern changes. Maybe, your teeth clench and your temples start to throb. There are things that your body is going, warning, anger is coming.
It's kind of like the light on the dashboard.
Yes.
For the check engine light. The light itself isn't the issue.
Right.
It's just that indicator that something under the hood is going on.
Right.
So that's what you're saying here is all of these physical things that are happening to your body. And that requires a skill set that not everybody has.
That's true.
To be aware of your body.
That's true.
That's very true. There are numerous people that we just kind of chuckle looking here in the studio, making eye contact. We know several people that that alone can be very, very difficult. So how do you even, if you don't have the ability to even have self-awareness, what do you do?
That's a great question. I don't know that I have a full answer for something like that, because self-awareness is the key to all kinds of healing. And if we're talking about using tools, that requires growth, and you can't have growth unless you have an inward reflection of how you behave. So I don't know what to say to someone who might not have the awareness. I think slowing down enough to just...
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah. Slowing
Learn
down
to slow down.
Really observe.
Yeah.
I think a lot of learning requires observation. What am I doing? I think the Bible gives you a reflection of yourself a lot of the times. And if you don't ask yourself, how do I fit into this? Do I behave this way? Is this passage talking about my behavior? And a lot of times it is. It's meant for you to reflect on. And other times it's not. It's about, a people group or a time in history. But that self-awareness is something you can pray for if you don't have it. Certainly God is willing to give you that, but slowing down and really observing how your body feels, because most people know I feel hot. I feel like my heart is racing. Those are indicators.
It's kind of the, I always think of sayings like this as kind of cheesy.
I love cheesy sayings.
You're a human being, not a human doing. I kind of laugh and I make fun of something that's overused and generalized, but it is that be something. Don't get caught up in the doing, because if you can be present, things slow down and you appreciate things more. So when you go for a walk, do you have your cell phone with you? If the answer is yes and you're having a hard time, maybe that answer needs to be no, so that you can be present on that walk and appreciate God's creation. Just even if you bring your phone with you to listen to a podcast or listen to a book on tape, whatever it may be, if that's preventing you from being in that moment and appreciating what God is doing and what he has done,
right,
leave it behind.
Right. There's so many things to distract us in the modern world. I mean, so many things can easily distract us. I mean, just, set the intention to pray for 5 minutes and see how many distractions come up.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my gosh. My mind will be in 16 different places.
Oh, for sure.
For
sure.
So I think you're right. I think slowing down is a tremendous, tremendous asset. Because then you have time to process, oh my goodness, I am getting a tightness in my chest.
Right.
And another is patterns one of the tools in the toolbox? I remember you talking about patterns, but I don't know that a pattern is necessarily a tool per se.
No, but unpacking a pattern is.
Okay, so let's talk about unpacking the pattern.
What I really encourage people to do is really start to look at what unhealthy patterns are present in your life. So when anger comes up, when other emotions like depression or anxiety or stress come up, what are the go-to things that you do that are unhealthy? And maybe they're kind of benign. They're not either healthy or unhealthy. They're just not what God has for us. You have to kind of start looking at those patterns. Are you someone that likes to be distracted and you'll sit on the couch and watch Netflix for 5 hours? Are you someone that wants to avoid your emotions and you take a nap, constantly napping? Are you someone who wants to self-soothe with drugs and alcohol or with shopping? A lot of people do that. There are things that become patterns that are, they just become a part of the makeup of how you do things, even though they're unhealthy. When you're angry, you immediately scream and criticize, or you gossip, or you're just negative. Like those things, you take a moment and you start to look at, how do I show up at this?
Yeah.
Wow. I show up like this a lot.
And I think you mentioned two things that we at some point need to circle back to. One is the pattern of food. I think as the church, I never hear the church talk about food being an idol, food being a negative pattern.
Yep.
We absolutely need to talk about that in some way. And the second one was shopping. That's another one that can be a negative pattern in your life that people fall back on. Both of those things
and again,
can be red flags.
Yeah, and they look benign. They're like, well, I'm just going to have a cookie. No big deal. But when that cookie becomes to self-soothe because you aren't going to God or you aren't dealing with your anger appropriately, that becomes an issue. An idol is anything you're running to instead of God. And God is the one that is supposed to help you process through the anger. A cookie can feel really great, for about 5-10 minutes. And then you're like, okay, I still need to go to God with this.
Wish I hadn't done that 5 minutes ago.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, and Jesus describes himself as the bread of life all the time. And he does that for a reason, is he is what sustains us. And, God is a Trinity, but so are we, in the sense that we have mind, body, and spirit. And if you don't have all three of those things healthy and aligned, all of a sudden that's like having three muscles, but you're only working out two of them. Two will become a little bit too heavy because you're using those muscles too much. Well, you had a situation, you were in fitness for
Right.
many, many, many years, and there was something, you were having literally a physical problem, and one of your coworkers turned to you and said, Deb, I think it's because,
Yeah.
what was that?
I kept getting neck pain to the point where like every 3 months, like clockwork, I'd pull out my neck. And I didn't realize that I was not balancing my training. Like I worked my chest a lot of push-ups, a lot of things that were just, chest driven. And I didn't work my upper back. I worked my lower back because, that it's attached to the booty and you want that to look good. But the upper back really got neglected. And that imbalance created something so drastic. Every 3 months, I was like incapacitated where I had to turn my whole body. It was silly. And then he was like, just start training hard. I mean, I see you train your back, but not very often and not very hard, not as hard as your chest. And so that balance between the two created, a more structural balance for me to not keep getting hurt.
And so instead of having a cookie, you would go to the chiropractor and get that realignment.
Yeah.
And really what was happening was your body was going, hey, red flag.
Yes.
Here's your sign. The
Yes.
check engine light is on. You should have this checked out. And when you did, and you did the appropriate adjustments to your
Right.
workouts,
The body started to heal.
the body started to react the way the body should.
And when you think about some of the major diseases that we have, you go to the doctor and they're like, well, that's caused by stress and that's caused by stress. And you're just like, wow. Like, if my stomach consistently hurts, then I have to look at it's either A, what am I eating, or what's my emotional landscape look like, because that's my body's way of talking to me. And our body does speak and our body has memory. And, we need to really start looking at that. People that get consistent headaches or, what's happening when you get that headache? Start tracking that. Start looking at that. Because your body, God gives you these physiological responses as a gift. I often think about, and gosh, Pastor, oh, he's so good. God, it must have been like, I don't know, like maybe almost 10 years ago, Pastor Doug did a sermon about pain as a gift.
This is Pastor Doug Souter of Calvary Fort Lauderdale.
Thank you for clarifying that. Yes. And it was something I had never heard, like pain as a gift. But he was talking about like, the disease of leprosy in the Bible. Leprosy actually is like your body stops feeling pain. So you consistently hurt yourself. You consistently you don't know you're touching a hot stove. That the pain itself is a warning and a gift. And when you don't have that, you're in grave danger of really hurting yourself. And that was just one little snippet of his sermon. But I always remembered that. Like, wow, I never considered how much feeling pain is actually a gift. And that if we didn't have that, we would have no awareness whatsoever. And so that's one of my tools is what's going on in my body, especially when I'm angry. Like before I even get angry, I can feel those things.
And again, if you slow down and you start to notice signs, that's when you switch from being reactive to proactive.
Yes.
And that's a huge difference. Now, all of a sudden, instead of spewing and you as my wife getting hit with all that shrapnel, I can take that out into the garage, get it out there. And the last thing you want to do with anger is bottle it up. So there is getting it out. You just don't want, again, you don't want to hit people. You don't want to, lose your testimony because there was some anger going on there. But switching just from the reactive to the proactive is a game changer.
Well, it makes all the world of a difference. You can behave in ways that you want to show up. I want to show up, more calm and collected. And I can't do that unless I actually pay attention. And I'm proactive by listening to my body.
So you assembled this toolbox through, like you said, all sorts of years of going through different classes.
Counseling.
Yep. And you really kind of built this toolbox over the course of how many years?
Maybe like 7, 8.
7 or 8 years. And so recently, everyone that's listening knows that mom's been in the hospital.
Right.
And so all of a sudden, God's got us in a different season, and he's applying pressure in ways that he's never applied pressure to us, right? So clearly it's time for us to grow.
Sure.
Time for us to grow.
Fun.
And I think I guess I'll say one of your frustrations has been, oh my goodness, I have to revisit this toolbox. But it really shouldn't be a frustration at all.
Right.
Because, God's going to apply pressure and you're going to have to revisit some things.
Yeah, and I think not giving myself the grace to realize this is not, I didn't arrive. I'm on a journey. I haven't gotten to a destination. This is a journey, and these are the tools that help me along the way. Like, to be mad at myself because I'm mad seems really counterproductive.
It does sound a little bit self-defeating.
Well, yeah, for sure.
So what were some of the things when mom was in the hospital where you found, let's start with what was making you angry?
So that would be, what's the trigger?
Yeah.
Yeah, what's the trigger? In this particular season, it was feeling unappreciated, honestly, not by my mother, but just by family members that weren't seeing the bigger scope of the picture. And that right there has another layer to it. If I'm not appreciated, I'm not valued. And if I'm not valued, I'm not worthy. And again, worthiness has been something I've fought for a very long time. I even wrote, Woman of Worth, because I wrote it to myself. I wrote that because I needed to remind myself God finds me valuable. And so that was underappreciated. Injustice. Injustice is a big theme in my story and in my life.
That's the one as your husband that I noticed the most.
Yeah.
When you were seeing injustice with maybe the way mom was being treated or just devalue of life.
Yeah.
Let's just kind of say, I definitely saw you getting frustrated.
Right. And I think some of the injustice, and that's the difference between righteous anger and just, anger that's unwarranted or wrath. It is righteous anger to see injustice and go, I need to go to God with that because I can't fix it. But injustice is really kind of strikes at our human heart, and this is why we're so prone to stories of the underdog winning, and we champion that because injustice is something we see in the world all the time, and it just deeply hurts. And so I was seeing some of that, and that injustice, if you've been on the receiving end of injustice yourself, it triggers that whole cycle of negativity and mistrust of people and disappointment. And so you got to work through those things in order to resolve some of the anger, because the anger is rooted in deeper things that have happened. It's just like, wow, I'm angry about something 20 years ago, didn't even realize it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And I think so you've opened up something that I don't think most people, myself included, I had not processed, which is the difference between anger and wrath. Big difference. One of the reasons translations of the Bible is important. You and I are kind of sticklers. We love our King James. Are there other translations that you can turn to? Of course, absolutely.
We're not dogmatic about it, but
no.
You know what? Words matter.
Words do matter. And it's one where, depending on what your translation is, they may not distinguish the difference. They may use the word anger when really it's the word wrath.
Right. What is it? James 1:20. The wrath of man does not produce the righteousness of God. Lots of versions read, the anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God. Well, that's just I mean, that would take a new believer and go, well, what? I can't ever be angry? Like, that is so unrealistic. I can't do this Christianity thing. Why even try? So the fact that the word wrath is used in the King James is so different. You know, wrath is...
So what is the difference between wrath and anger?
Wrath really produces, human wrath produces that spiritual warfare where you're fighting the urge to produce revenge and to hold on to bitterness and to just kind of stew in anger. So it's a heightened level of human anger to the point where now it's become, sinful, to the point where you're just like, when God says you're angry in your heart, you've already murdered someone. I don't think it's just anger. It's the wrath of wanting someone gone. Like you're not worthy of this. Let's just go. I think I always refer to like wrath as the unholy cousin of anger.
Yeah. And so how do we circle this back to the toolbox? So anger can be a good thing when there is a place for it. Right. So for me, I'm a drummer. There's nothing wrong with me taking out some anger on a set of drums.
Right.
I go into the garage and, wail on the drums and leave the problems there. And the whole time I'm praying and I'm meditating, God, this is what I'm angry about. This is why I'm angry. And I can process all of that. And that's healthy. One of the worst things you can do is bottle up anger.
I agree. I think it grows when you bottle it.
And that's when it turns into wrath. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's when you give the devil a foothold and you go to bed angry. Mm-hmm. The reason the Bible advises against that is because when you consistently do that, that anger turns into wrath.
For sure. It does. And that's where the root of bitterness starts. Like, you just can't let something go. It's because you're stewing in it. You haven't let it come out in a healthy way, or even if it hasn't come out verbally, you're not taking it to God and saying, I don't know what to do with this. Please help me. And that's where stuffing stuff down. I mean, that's a bad habit that a lot of people take, and they self-soothe. I mean, I think a lot of people that have struggled with addiction struggle with anger too. It's because they've used the method of self-soothing through alcohol or drugs, so they don't have to feel. And I don't think you can ever truly heal until you're willing to feel the depth of your own pain. How can you heal if you just keep hiding from it and you keep running from anger or the injustice or feeling unworthy, and you run from that? Where are you going to go with that? It winds up being pushed down, and then it'll bubble up in an instant. So it's important in so many ways.
And in your Devo, you kind of title, I think, the tool as what lies beneath. Mm-hmm. And you talk about how you use journaling. Mm-hmm. as a way to identify all that stuff that was going on under the surface so it wouldn't spew out and so on and so forth. For me, it was the drum. Mm-hmm. It really was. The drum was my journal, and I was sitting there drumming to God. I was writing to him in a sense, using that, and all of my emotion, whether it was positive emotion, joy, or if I was angry, didn't matter. But all of that went into the drum, and that was me processing all of those feelings. But you use journaling. I've seen you journal, or you're a writer. That's what you do. So that's what helped you process anger, right?
Oh gosh. Yeah. I don't know where I'd be without writing. Just God has used that in a miraculous way in my life. And it's always been one of those toolboxes where you unpack the pattern by going, okay, this is how I behave. These are the destructive patterns. what lies beneath, and then what do I do instead. It's kind of like when you're giving up. I was a smoker for many, many years before I came to know the Lord. And there had to be a replacement for the addiction so that I could have something that filled that space. And so, after dinner, that anyone that's been a smoker or is currently a smoker, the after dinner cigarette's pretty hard to give up because it's a trigger. It's like, I've had a nice meal. I want to relax. I want to finish my meal with a cigarette. Well, if you don't replace that with something, there's this like angst that's there. And so for me, it was, sometimes I needed to replace it with prayer, or I would need to listen to music and worship. I used to name my playlist because music can be very, very soothing. So sometimes I'd be like, okay, this is my playlist when I'm angry. What am I going to call it? And people are straight up crazy. So I'd label, people are straight up crazy. So anytime I knew I was like irritated by people, I'd play the list and it would help me calm down. Or, if I was like really ticked off, I would name it like keeping my sanity, something silly, because that would always make me kind of laugh. But not everyone's sarcastic. So maybe it's like soothe my soul, Savior, something that like you can label and go, okay, I'd play music. And that was my replacement to the unhealthy pattern that I had journaled with. If I'm not going to get angry, what do I need to say to myself? That would go in the journal. And sometimes it was a matter of like, okay, this level of anger is okay because it reflects injustice and that upsets the heart of God. But going further in that anger does not produce God's righteousness. So me escalating my anger doesn't prove that I'm any more hurt. And that kind of stuff went in the journal. It's like, okay, kind of almost logically walking it through. Does this reaction warrant what I'm feeling?
And most of the time, let's be honest, most of the time we overreact. Right? The things that cause us anxiety, even if the worst possible scenario came true, usually the amount of anxiety we give to that is nowhere near what it deserved. Especially for me. I'm a person that, I'm an introvert, so going out and hanging out with a bunch of people, just that alone can give me anxiety. And then it's never as bad as what I make it up to be. So yeah, that we can definitely overreact. And what's interesting, mom's been diagnosed with, very early onset dementia. And, as we've been talking with the doctors, it's incredible the difference music can make in a person's life. When, kind of anger can kick in. Anger is a side effect of dementia.
Yes.
And one of the things the doctors recommend you do is play more music.
And I've seen a miraculous like turnaround. She could be really ticked off, and you put on like Frank Sinatra, and she's
my gosh, she's dancing
like within moments.
Yeah,
it's wild to watch.
It's very, very crazy. But even just something like that, turning on some worship music, can absolutely be an amazing thing.
Yeah.
But that's why I think drumming helps me.
We need to get you back in there and drum.
Hopefully, we got construction going on at the house the next couple of days, and I am praying that after that is over, that I can get back in there and get drumming again. Oh my goodness, yes, it's very much missed. Music is really quite therapeutic.
Yeah, think about music throughout the Bible. David was a psalmist and played to the Lord. When Saul was conflicted or upset, he would call for the harpist. He'd call for David to come in too, so
so many times, I think I've even mentioned it on the podcast, when you're really struggling with something, some of the areas, it's so easy to have to just kind of spout off scripture for people to get help them get past something, to give someone to hope for something. But what King David did that was so amazing was the lament psalms.
Yes.
I think it's so critically important that when he is sitting there and he's just filled with so much emotion and he's being so raw and so honest with God, there's so much beauty in that. And people, if you don't go to the Psalms when you're having a hard time with something, whatever it is, go start reading and flipping through. Just do a Google search on the lament Psalms. It's about 25%, I think, of the Psalms are lament Psalms. But there's something to be said about you're struggling with something. Go listen to music, go worship, and go wrestle with God about that.
Yeah, and it's a perfect example of what we said. David's not bottling anything up. He's not stuffing it down. He's bringing it to the Lord. He's crying out. He's expressing his anger in his circumstances to a holy God who's willing to listen.
And God can do so much. If you just come to him with your honesty, he can do so much with that.
Yeah.
He can do so, because now he can talk directly with you, and there's a direct correlation with where you're off base, and he can address that.
Right.
You know, whenever I have anxiety, I have to, I'm always at fault. And even here lately, there were instances where I had to go to God and go, God, I am frustrated with you, which means something's wrong with me. Help me find where I'm askew.
Right.
I should not be frustrated with you. You have proven over and over and over again that you're a good father.
Amen.
And I'm doing my daily devotional and I'm setting my reading down and I'm going, why am I frustrated with you, God? After today's Devo, I am frustrated. You're not wrong, God. That just is another check engine light has just gone on, going, why am I frustrated with God? It's because my perception or my definition, something is askew. What he's trying to do in my life, I am misinterpreting what he's trying to do.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's if you can go to God in honesty, so get that anger out and, you know, journal that anger out, drum that anger out, whatever it is, but get that out of you.
It needs to come up and out some way, somehow. And a part of the thing I see you doing recently is going back to men in your life who you hold in very high esteem, that are very godly, that are able to speak life into you and able to give you direction in some of your blind spots. And I think that's an incredible toolbox. It's an incredible tool to utilize the people you love and respect and seek counsel. I mean, that's an anger management toolbox for sure. Yeah.
There's definitely different men and you, so not isolated to men, but definitely the being a man, you know, there's things about leading a household spiritually and things like that, where I definitely favor advice of men just because I can relate, you know, on a different level where, you know, you're definitely one of those tremendous tools that's in that toolbox, but that's something you have to fight for in your life. If you do not have men and women, and it's not a lot, I would count, including you, 4 people.
Yeah.
My father, our mentor, the guy that married us. I have a buddy that's out in Colorado, and you. Those are head and shoulders my 4. There's other people that I can go to for sure.
Yeah.
But most of the time, those are my 4 tools. One's a hammer, one's a saw, one's a Phillips, and one's a flathead. So that's going to cover. I'm not going to answer that. Those 4 tools are the most commonly used tools, but there's other things. But I've been. I don't know if I would say I've been lucky. I've been blessed.
Definitely blessed.
Yeah, and I definitely have the radar up in my life to go, who are these people? Oh, and actually a good friend of mine in Fort Lauderdale that taught me how to drum. He's another one that I really admire a lot. And even his wife, and they're not Christians. So I got to be careful what I go to them with, because they see things through a different worldview, but I really respect who they are. And that's something that the only thing I would really ever give myself credit for, because I mess a lot of stuff up, is trying to surround myself with the right people, because all of those people that are on my list, the reason they're on that list has nothing to do with money or this status or this, that. There is an attribute that they have that I want.
Amen.
And the more I can hang out with them, the more I'm hoping that rubs off with me.
Amen. And
so that is absolutely something worth fighting for. That's why you have accountability partners at things, your AAs or your Celebrate Recovery. You have to have sponsors. You have to have this, that, and the other. That's part of why they have that there. But these people that I've been lucky enough, blessed with, my relationship with them goes so much deeper than just being a sponsor in my life.
Right.
These people truly want what's best for me. And I think it's sad, because mentorship, I
don't see a lot of it anymore.
Not in the Christian church. It is so strange, because we have Ricky that was on this show.
Yeah.
In talking with her, we've had the same types of discussions where, Christianity, for one reason or another, we just don't have just that mentorship the same way. Even you look at something like Jehovah's Witnesses, the minute you, I guess I'll say, convert to becoming a Jehovah's Witness, they assign to you a mentor. And that mentor does life with you and teaches you what they know. And in Christianity, that can be a very difficult thing to find, but that is a hill worth dying on, for sure. Be in constant hunt of that.
Right. And I think accountability people and support systems actually are different too. And they're both valuable. Accountability people kind of like show up and go, hey, hold on, let's redirect. And support people do that, but they also walk alongside you, and they hold you up when you just, like Moses, he just doesn't want to lift the rod anymore, and he has Aaron, and Aaron holds up his arms. And it's more than just accountability. It's people who will do life in the good and in the bad, and it's a blessing to have, and they're rare.
They are, and you have to be teachable too. I was on with our mentor today, Pastor Bill, and when we were kind of done talking through everything today, I said, Pastor Bill, I really got to thank you that you're willing to not pull punches with me. When you see something that I'm doing wrong, a perspective that I have, or I'm getting lazy, or this, that, you have no problem going, hey, Mike, I love you. This is what I see.
Yeah.
And it's one thing. You can also have that and not be open to that correction. Mm-hmm. And so I had to thank Pastor Bill for being there and being like, hey, Bill, thank you so much for jumping on the phone and slapping me around a little bit and getting me back in line. And it was humbling for him to say, hey, thank you for taking what I'm dishing out, because so many people, run from correction. So, it's definitely a two-way street, but that toolbox of just having people in your life that make you better.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
And so many times in this world, we look at make you better. They're like-minded people, and that can be dangerous. Birds of a feather flock together. So don't find an accountability partner for your anger and use someone else that's angry.
Yeah, that's a good point.
You don't want people to...
But wait, I mean, when you think about it, if someone's already like walked through that journey, they can relate to you. Like if I'm going to
I'm not
mentor
saying
somebody,
on the other side.
Okay.
I'm not saying on the other side.
Yeah.
If they were angry and they're no longer angry, that's a totally different story. I mean, someone that's literally actively struggling with it is probably not. I mean, there's a place for that person, and if that's what you have, absolutely go for it. But I would say it's worth fighting for, to find that person that has gone through it and knows how to get through to the other side.
Right.
That's because what we try and do on this podcast, I think you even said it at the beginning of the show, is we're here to shorten the learning curve. Mm-hmm. Someone that's been through it has, will tell you, hey, don't fall for this. Don't get so complacent here, so on and so forth. But yeah, so blessed. That's one of the beautiful things about working inside the church, is you just have access to so many of those resources. And if you don't work for the church, I knew Pastor Bill, and he had this access to my life long before I worked for Calvary.
That's true.
So, don't give up. That is so, the men and women in my life that I respect, that have spoken into my life. Mm-hmm. I can't imagine where I would be without them.
Yeah, it's reminds me of the verse, faithful are the wounds of a friend. Like, you have to have friends that are willing to tell you hard truths, willing to, like you said to Bill, slap you around a little bit in the most loving way. Like, hey, this is what I see and you're not seeing it. And those are the kind of people that really help your spiritual growth. And you get to be that for someone else, and they get to be it for you. And it's what community really looks like. I mean, think about when, Paul confronts Peter about, not wanting to eat with Gentiles. Like, he didn't hold back any punches. And Peter was willing to take that correction. And Peter took it and repented and made a change. And Paul was faithful to tell him the hard thing. And that's what we need. We need that kind of relationship with people.
And that's where it's so dangerous to say, you do you, or your truth. That is so counterproductive.
It is. It's very hindering to growth.
Oh my gosh. If you're angry and you turn to me and I go, you do you.
Yeah.
There is no love in that.
No, it's dismissive, actually.
And it's me avoiding a confrontation with you.
Yes.
And it's you avoiding a confrontation within you.
Yeah.
It's just
That's
issues
such a good
upon
point.
issues upon issues upon issues. So don't find friends that say you do you.
Yeah.
That's or your truth or this that.
People that co-sign your nonsense. Those are the people you want to get far away from.
But that can be so tricky. That like it's easy for us to.
Well, it looks like support. Oh, like when you're angry and you go to someone and they're like, "Yeah, you have a right to be angry," and maybe you do, but you're trying to get anger up and out and productive, and they're just giving you the fuel for the fire, and that that's dangerous.
But what's toxic too potentially is getting anger out can in the moment feel good.
Oh,
because it's so bottled up inside of you. And again, if you have the wrong person in place, they can speak to and justify that, saying, "No, that would they crossed you, and you had every right to get it." Well, even if they did cross you, there's other ways to deal with this, which is a great segue to one of the tools. I think it's the last tool you talk about, which is discovering new ways to release your anger.
Yeah.
Which I started drumming. I'm so bad at dates. Let's just say it was 20. It's got to be probably close to 15 years ago now. So prior to that, I didn't have that in my life. And so I didn't cope with it well. And that became a new way for me to release that anger, because I could take out whatever frustrations on that drum I wanted to. If I needed to break a drumstick, if I needed to, who cares? At the end of the day, who cares? No harm, no foul, unless you're a neighbor, and you didn't want to hear that. But you do have to discover new ways of potentially releasing that anger.
Yeah. It's important to be released, and for a lot of people it's physical activity, and that's a really healthy way. Like I would go work out or I'd go swim. I never was a runner, but I know lots of people like that, but just, yeah.
I think we've been married 4 years now, and I think there's been maybe half a dozen times in the 4 years that we've been married where you'll walk in the house and you just have like a look and a vibe going on. And I just kind of point over to the garage because I know in the garage is the punching bag.
Yes.
And I just kind of go, Deb, I have no problem sitting and talking and having a conversation with you, but not until you go out there and you wail on that punching bag.
And it's so helpful. I mean,
and you do come in different, even if you go out there for all of 5 or 10 minutes, and you just
there's something about it.
Beat the crap out of that punching bag. You come in and there is a different, a different posture to you.
Yeah.
So what other, besides journaling, like you love singing?
I do.
Has singing become a way for you to get out anger?
Not so much. No.
No.
That might be a good way. I haven't really considered that in the scope of anger. I know that when I'm sad, I sing, or when I feel lonely or distant from God and I need to draw near to him, I sing, but I've never considered doing it in the midst of anger.
Oh, there's nothing like blaring some speed metal.
Oh, I think that kind of gets me more ramped up, man. I want to release anger, not get more angry.
Oh my goodness, too funny. Okay, so journaling helps for me. Drumming helped.
Yep.
Punching bag helped you.
For sure.
What else helped you over the years?
Sometimes just taking a walk. Just something as simple as taking a walk, removing myself from the environment and just quieting myself, because, I have a tendency in anger to be pretty vocal and loud, and that can get dangerous. You can say things you cannot take back. But if you leave the situation, it's like kind of having that timeout. Like, timeouts are not just good for little kids. Timeouts are really important. Like when I was in the depth of my deepest anger and I was going through some of these programs, there were things where in my family of origin, things would keep coming up. And it was just like, wow, this is unacceptable. And there were times I had to remove myself. We did a family dinner every Thursday night forever and a day. And as I'm processing through some grief and anger and trauma, going to that family dinner, there were times where I had to take a time out, even if it meant walking around the apartment complex and then coming back in. Like, I don't have to explain to you. I don't owe you an explanation other than I need to excuse myself. I don't have to say I'm angry or you triggered me. I mean, I could once I process it, but I need to take a few minutes just to walk around the parking lot. And that time out, that physical walk would produce so much more calm in me, because then I cannot let my mouth say something that I can't take back.
And you have to be careful when you do that too, because other people can wind you up and you can wind yourself up. There's so many times where being caught in my own head, I've made things worse.
Yes.
So when you step away, you also have to be very conscious about what you're then going to say to yourself.
True. You can stew in it and as you're taking this walk, or you can bring it to God.
and come in and just spew over everyone. And
like
that
you're
walk did you no
preparing
good.
Something to say in your walk. No, that's the wrong posture for sure.
Yeah, so it's not just stepping away. You're using that stepping away and as a conscious effort to go, how do I...
And I think it's the acknowledgement. I am angry. Like for the longest time, it was, I'm not hurt. I'm fine. That was the motto.
Not capable of vulnerability.
Yeah, I wasn't allowed to feel that. So it was like, I'm fine. So even in the walk, it's the acknowledgement. I am angry. I have figured out what my trigger is.
I will be fine.
I will be fine. Yeah.
I just need to process. I need to step away and I need to process.
Right.
And I think, yeah, even in the last episode, maybe it's 2 episodes ago, that whole conversation around arresting and replacing, that is a discipline that you will never master. You will always need it.
Yeah. And that's the art of taking a lie and replacing it with the truth, replacing it with the word of God. In case somebody hadn't heard that episode, we talked pretty extensively about that.
Yeah, but that's one of those things that you can absolutely feel like a hypocrite because you go, I'm so tired of arresting and replacing.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
You know, one of my coworkers at Calvary, we were having a conversation that was just filled with irony because of so many different reasons. And, you know, I was telling him, I said, you know, I can feel like a hypocrite because we sit on a podcast or I work at a church and I'm sitting there and I struggle with anger. And he goes, oh yeah, you think I write for the church and I write Devos. And he's like, so many times I'll mess up. And then I go to Calvary's Devo page and it's my Devo on that subject. That people are, he's like, you get served humble pie. I can relate to
that.
Yeah,
oh yeah, I can relate to that.
So, you know, these things that we're talking about, you know, the Anger Toolbox and arresting and replacing, you know, they are just that. They're tools. You never stop using a hammer. You never stop using a screwdriver. Whenever there's a screw, if you start to use a hammer, it doesn't work.
You're right.
So tools, that's why you have a toolbox, is because when something is broken and it needs to get fixed, you walk out and you grab that same toolbox that you've always had. And those tools hopefully will still be in there, but you have to start filling it. So filling it, what the things that we talked about today of the right people and journaling and getting it out, that all of these things are in that toolbox.
Yeah. And you're never, like you said, you're not finished with the toolbox.
No.
You're always going to be under construction until you get to the other side, until you get to heaven. So God is always going to be working on you, and you're always going to need to co-labor with God to work on yourself.
Yep. So hopefully, you know, we did due diligence today on the toolbox. Do you think there's anything we left out? I'm trying to think back of all the things we talked about ahead of time, but I think,
I mean, there's always counsel, like not just friends, but like an actual professional counselor.
Yeah.
You know, never be afraid to take that step of seeking out an unbiased person that
shares your worldview.
That's important too, especially as a Christian. I don't go to non-Christian counselors. Just doesn't work very well.
No, it doesn't. So that's one of those areas.
Yeah.
Be very careful.
Yeah.
And if you do, make sure whatever advice is given to you and direction is absolutely, you take it and you filter it through Scripture.
Amen.
And honestly, the same thing for advice from friends and so on and so forth. Everything that is told to me by someone like you or someone like my father, all of it gets put through the filter of Scripture. But especially if you're turning to advice from a secular world, what would Jesus say about what was told to me is the very first thing you have to ask. Right. So, but yeah, counseling can be an amazing thing.
Oh, it's been a lifeline for me.
Great exercises. They can have great exercises that you can do.
Yeah, and that's another thing. There are counselors that will just listen, and sometimes that's really needed. But if you're only going to a counselor that listens and doesn't give you practical application, it gets old real quick. Like, I don't want to pay you to listen to me talk. I can just sit in my closet and talk to God. Like, I need something tangible to walk away from. And I always set that relationship with a counselor right from the get-go. Like, I am looking for practical tools. I'm grateful that you're going to listen, but I'm action oriented. Like, give me something to do. So that's important.
Yeah, absolutely important.
To have the balance of both of those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think those are great tools.
Yeah, so I think, hopefully this has been helpful for everyone out there as we've kind of talked through some of this. I have no doubt we will circle back to some of these tools that are in the toolbox, because when God opens doors and when God closes doors, there are all sorts of emotions that come along with with those open and closed doors. There can be joy, there can be anger, there can be all sorts of things. So hopefully these tools in the toolbox were helpful to you guys. I have no doubt we'll circle back to it. But
Yeah.
another episode in the books.
There we go.
Another one in the books. So thank you guys so much for joining us.
We love you.
We appreciate your support, and we will see you guys in the next episode of Detours. Thank you so much.
Bye, guys.